look, Jalen Reagor is a bust. He just is. He's a hyper bust. He's a hyper bust in comparison to Justin Jefferson. I will argue that Jalen Hurts can win you games if he's 100% as easily perhaps as Gardner Minshew.
Mac and Mac guys here. John McClellan, Joey McDonald on Birds 365 on the return to work week for the Philadelphia Eagles after their bye. Joining us is one of our favorites. If he can get his phone to go straight up and down there. He's out there on the roads, but he's good enough to hop aboard with us here on Birds 365. Marcus Hayes. How are you, Marcus?
I'm busy. Busy. I'm sorry I'm having to broadcast from the vehicle today. It's not in motion, just so you know. And but I have a couple of appointments I have to. Tuesdays are usually pretty busy for me because the NFL shuts down on Tuesday, which means I have to do everything on Tuesday. So this was a unavoidable conflict. So but I'm glad to be on. Thank you for having me.
I love that we got you, Marcus. Coffee and Cars with Marcus Hayes. I think that's a future Netflix show.
That's right.
Just give me a heads up if you got to go into your appointment, by the way. We're doing this on the fly. So I did want to get you on because obviously you're very opinionated. I love that. I love people who are willing to go on record with their thoughts. And obviously sometimes those thoughts aren't the most popular. And you know, Eagles fans are a very passionate group. So your latest at Inquirer.com, you know, kind of talks about Eagles GM Howie Roseman, Coach Nick Sirianni. They've done okay. And they have the Eagles in good shape at the bye, despite the quarterback of this football team, Jalen Hurts. Kind of take us through that thought process.
Well, you know, the biggest, I guess, topic of conversation with the Eagles during the bye week is how bad their third receiver is, which to me is typical Philadelphia because you've got a team that most people consider to be a playoff fantasy team. There's no way they'd get there. They're on the cusp of the playoffs. They're a game below 500. They are that with a rookie coach and essentially a rookie quarterback. And because Jalen Reagor dropped 2 passes late in a game that Jalen Hurts had already lost, people are upset for 2 weeks coming off a win, mainly because they're angry that Howie Roseman exists. And you know, and I'm no Howie apologist or supporter. I've been as critical of Howie as anybody, and I believe that Howie's the reason they are where they are because Howie and Jeffrey, after they won the Super Bowl, took more control and didn't give Doug Peterson the kind of control you need as a head coach.
I thought they deserved the credit.
Exactly. So that's as critical as you can be. If you lose your Super Bowl head coach and the team goes downhill because of the way you do business, that's as critical as you can be. That said, you know, you look at a guy like Andre Dillard, who, you know, this a year ago, or even say 4 months ago, we considered to be a bust. Andre Dillard played pretty well in relief of Jordan Mailata 2 years into his career. I guess this is the third year of his career. That's great. You know, you got a late first round left tackle who can function as a starting left tackle in the NFL. He's no longer a bust. He's a backup because Mailata's transcended. He's a you know, a unicorn, but it forgives some of the issues with Howie Roseman. Now, I don't know that Howie Roseman, as difficult as it seemed for Howie Roseman to live down J.J. Arcega-Whiteside over DK Metcalf, it will be even more difficult for Howie Roseman to live down Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson. I actually wrote a column for tomorrow about Micah Parsons. Now, the dialogue in Philadelphia is if Howie had drafted Justin Jefferson instead of Jalen Reagor, he would not have had to draft Devonta Smith and could have drafted Micah Parsons the subsequent year. Well, number one, you guys know the Eagles haven't drafted a linebacker in the first round since '79. And I think they've drafted 5 in the second round since Lurie's owned the team, all of whom have been disappointments. That said, they're never going to draft a linebacker in the first round. The other thing is, if you exit last year with Justin Jefferson as your only wide receiver, there's a very good chance they're going to draft a second wide receiver to pair with him. I would say if Justin Jefferson has shown you that he could be a difference maker, he needs somebody to be in tandem with. Now, all that said, Howie Roseman also did acquire Jordan Mailata to be coached by Jeff Stoutland, who he retained after firing Doug Peterson as the offensive line coach. Also drafted Landon Dickerson, who's playing very well at left guard. Also drafted Jack Driscoll last year in the 4th round, who, before he got hurt again, was playing very well at right guard. So it's very difficult to ignore the fact that, number one, the team is relevant. Number two, they might not be a winning team, but they're closer to being a winning team than most people thought. And number three, it's because of the draft picks. And despite Jalen Hurts, who can't function in a normal pro offense, but that's okay because they got a win from Gardner Minshew, for whom Howie Roseman traded at the end of training camp for a 6th-round pick and got rid of Joe Flacco. So they are where they are, for better or worse. You know, it's not like they're on top of the division, but they are where they are as quickly as they are because of Howie Roseman and maybe some good luck.
I guess I have become a typical Eagle fan because at the end of that Giant game, jump ball, Jalen Reagor can't come down with it. Oh, I thought, yes, what the hell are we doing playing this guy? Not the quarterback had already lost the game for it. Says you survived. Yeah, that's on Jalen Reagor. So I've been going nuts screaming about him for.
Well, that's fine, but Jalen Reagor wasn't in the end zone. You know, I mean, Jalen Reagor. I mean, he dropped an earlier pass.
Ball's going to be at the there.
He dropped an. Yeah, so he dropped an earlier pass that there. If you look at the photo, he's being tackled as he's dropping it. Like that's the photo that's going to run with my column tomorrow. He's clearly being interfered with, and it's a tough call, but he's getting tackled as he's catching it. He certainly wasn't getting tackled when he dropped the second one. But again, you know, he didn't drop it in the end zone, and Many's the Swift took a cup in the lip. You know, 1 yard line for the Eagles doesn't necessarily ensure that they'll even run it, right? I mean, we've seen that act before from Nick Sirianni. All that said, look, Jalen Reagor's a bust. He just is. He's a hyper bust. He's a hyper bust in comparison to Justin Jefferson, who might be the best young receiver we've seen since, you know, a most polished young receiver we've seen since like Marvin Harrison. You know what I mean? Who, if you look at the way he played, not necessarily his numbers, but the way he played, you were just like, wow, look at this. This guy's ready for prime time immediately. Just plug and play. And most receivers aren't like that. So all that said, yeah, Howie's done a better job than I think we give him credit for. That doesn't mean he gets an A, but he certainly doesn't get an F.
No, and that's fair. And I think you bring up a good point. Ultimately, the Eagles wanted Andre Dillard to be their left tackle. Didn't work, but they got a left tackle. And they got one of the better left tackles in football. You can go and get players in different ways, Marcus. So I agree with you. People are too focused on the first-round picks, the hits or misses. Talk about Justin Jefferson. Part of his success, as you mentioned, Adam Thielen, who's a great receiver on the other side, plus a quarterback who can get him the football. Whatever you think of Kirk Cousins, the guy throws for 4,000 yards every year, no matter dating back to Washington. So that's that high-volume passer, which you wouldn't have if you were here. So, but we are where we are, and that is at the bye week, really good chance to make the playoffs. Soft schedule in theory, except the Dallas Cowboys in Week 18, and we don't even know if they're going to be playing. They might be locked into a seed. Gardner Minshew played the way he did against the New York Jets. Why is this a closed book for the Philadelphia Eagles in that we have to look at Jalen Hurts? Isn't it about getting to the playoffs at this point, or is it more important to evaluate Jalen Hurts for 4 more games at the potential expense of a playoff position. Now, it doesn't mean Gardner's going to get you there, but guess what? If Jalen Hurts isn't playing well at halftime on Sunday, why not try Gardner Minshew? Is that crazy?
Well, it's not only not crazy, but Jalen Hurts is only valuable as a starter when he's 100% physically. If he's at 80% with that ankle injury, then it's malpractice to start him. Number one, he's just not a fast enough processor with a quick enough release and a strong enough arm to function from the pocket the way you have to function from the pocket against Washington football team, which gets to you. That defensive line will get to you. Number two, he has bad mechanics and bad habits already. Those are always amplified by lower leg injuries when you're a quarterback. There are very few guys like Aaron Rodgers who can strain his calf or break his toe and just arm talent his way through an NFL opponent. And certainly Jalen Hurts is not one of those guys. So before we get to the point where we're making the assumption that it's apples to apples, I would contend that if you are unable to play in a game 2 weeks from your next game and 3 weeks removed from your injury, or I'm sorry, if you are unable to play in a game a week removed from your injury, you are very unlikely to be 100% 3 weeks removed from your injury. So that's part A for me. Part B is you have a responsibility to develop more than Jalen Hurts. You have a responsibility to give, sorry, Jody, Jalen Reagor better opportunities to catch football from a better quarterback. They haven't passed the ball. They hadn't passed the ball much in the 4 weeks before that Giants game. And, Jalen Reagor wasn't given a whole lot of opportunity. I don't know if he's just incapable of catching the ball, whether it's a mind thing, but we've seen this before, like Nagel.
Oh, tell us we're not losing Marcus. I wanted to be able to say to him, which came first, the chicken or the egg? I could just as easily sit here and go, they need to give Jalen Hurts viable wide receivers who can catch the football. If you're going to evaluate him as the future quarterback of the Eagles, it is to say Jalen Reagor's got to be given a chance to prove that he can catch the ball by catching it from someone better than Jalen Hurts. It all comes down to which end of the gun you're looking into.
It is a chicken and the egg scenario, which is the problem. But Marcus brings up a good point in the fact that people do say, you hear it all the time. We've said it on this show. It's about evaluating Jalen Hurts, where Marcus is absolutely correct. You have to evaluate more than Jalen Hurts. And Jalen Reagor aside, you have to evaluate Devonta Smith. You have to get Devonta Smith up to speed, and he's a potential star player. So it is about more than Jalen Hurts, and I feel like, and we'll bring Marcus back in here. I feel like, Marcus, that too many people say it's all about Jalen Hurts. It's all about Jalen Hurts. No, it's about the football team as a whole.
Right, and you owe it to Fletcher Cox and Lane Johnson and Jason Kelsey and all these other players who are veterans to get them to the playoffs every time you can. And if Gardner Minshew gives you a better chance of that in week to week, fine. I will argue that Jalen Hurts can win you games if he's 100% as easily perhaps as Gardner Minshew, because Minshew does have limitations, and if you game plan for him, you force him to throw deep outs and long balls and flush from the pocket and disguise blitzes. He has his limitations as well. He's only started 25 games in his career, so we're not talking about Kirk Cousins here. We're talking about a guy who's relatively green. But to your point, John, I mean, I want to see more balls for Quez Watkins. I want to see more balls for Devonta Smith, who is, again, incredibly polished, ready to play, and probably the least exploited asset in the NFL at this point because he has to play with Jalen Hurts. Devonta Smith should have a Justin Jefferson year, but he's playing, with Kevin Cobb. So he just can't. It's just not there. But yeah, the idea that you would sacrifice your best chance of getting to the postseason to develop a quarterback with such a low ceiling. I mean, I don't think anybody would argue that Jalen Hurts is a franchise quarterback with a franchise quarterback's arm. That to me is just silliness. He might be able to win you a lot of games and maybe even able to win you a Super Bowl by hook or by crook, but he's not that guy. And it's like a non-starter in a conversation. If somebody says, "How do you know he's not a franchise quarterback?" that implies that they think he might be, and at that point, the conversation for me is over.
All right, so we know that when the game rolls around on Sunday, score will dictate the way that the coach is going to call this game from a play call standpoint. But in theory, before the game starts, you can have a belief on what you're hoping to be able to see, that you're going to go out and you're going to dictate the way that it's going to go. What do you think the run-pass ratio should be going into this game, Marcus? Against
60-40.
60-40.
It doesn't matter
pass.
Yes, it doesn't matter the competition. If Jalen Hurts starts, it has to be 60-40. You cannot ask him to throw the ball more than 20, 22 times. That's just who he is and what he is.
All right, if Jalen's not good to go, because we don't know that he's even going to play yet, we'll find out a little later in the week. If he can't go, Gardner Minshew's the starter. What's the run-pass ratio?
50-50. I believe that this offensive line, especially if Kelsey is 8% or better, this offensive line can dictate, especially as the game progresses, that it's going to run the ball productively, almost regardless of who's running the ball. You know what I'm saying? All the running backs have been successful. The common theme has been the offensive line. This is an elite offensive line. You know, Jeff Stoutland, all due respect to, all the assistant coaches and coordinators who have been here, including like John Gruden, who won a Super Bowl, and other great assistants and position coaches. Jeff Stoutland's the best assistant coach they've ever had. And it's not really close. I mean, what he's done with different types of players, old players who he made, middle-aged players he made better, old players he got more out of, young players he turned into offensive linemen, it's just unprecedented. So this offensive line can dictate that it's going to run the ball. And there's very little the opposition can do about it.
Yeah, I agree with you, Marcus. I've argued that Jeff Stoutland might be the MVP of this team. When people look at Darius Slay or Jason Kelsey, I look at Jeff Stoutland, what he's able to do with that offensive line, with all the injuries, in context to other teams in this league when they suffer injuries on the offensive line and things get really, really ugly very quickly. But I do want to circle back to your thought process on the quarterback, because obviously people are very interested in that in Philadelphia. It sounds to me like your evaluation is over. So the goal for the Eagles should be to get better in the offseason. And to me, that means short term, that means get into the playoffs for people like Jason Kelsey, for people like Fletcher Cox, by hook or by crook, no matter what you have to do. And then you look to improve at the quarterback position in the offseason. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. Looks like we lost